Minasan konnichiwa. Hey everyone. On the 25th of November 1970, 5 men sneaked into a military headquarters in Tokyo to start a coup d'etat to overthrow the Japanese government. At least that was the plan. These men stood on the balcony and gave a speech to inspire revolution, but the soldiers watching down below laughed at them. But this wasn't a comedy act. This was a tragedy on stage. Once they realized that their coup was a failure, 2 of them committed the samurai ritual of seppuku, ending their lives while the other 3 were sent to jail. Among the 2 dead bodies was a 45-year-old man who had published over 50 books and was one of the most famous and brilliant novelists Japan has ever produced. His name was Yukio Mishima. The Japanese people were so confused by the news that some assumed Mishima had won the Nobel Prize in Literature. But why would a man at the height of his fame and success get involved in such a bizarre act? Today I'll try to answer by discussing Mishima's life, his obsession with bodybuilding, his brilliant novels, his final act of exhibiting his death. In his essay Sun and Steel, he outlined his philosophical ideas about life as well as death, a modern-day samurai manifesto, so to speak. So I'll attempt to tell you 9 lessons or secrets we can learn from Mishima. Get yourself some sushi and sake. Let's talk about the true last samurai. Born in 1925 in Tokyo into a wealthy family who could trace their lineage to Ieyasu Tokugawa, the founder of Tokugawa dynasty that ruled Japan for almost 250 years, from 1600 until 1860s. At the age of 16, he changed his name from Hiraoka Kimitake to Yukio Mishima. Mishima is an area near Mount Fuji, and Yuki has 2 meanings, snow or bound for. So it's possible he was inspired by the snow-capped Mount Fuji, a Shinto deity and the tallest mountain in Japan. Mishima grew up when Japan was going through rapid industrialization and military expansion. For centuries, Japan was closed off, but some 50 years before Mishima was born, Japan started to modernize and eventually conquer most of Asia. But all his optimism came to a crushing end in 1945 when Japan surrendered to the Allied forces and was occupied by the United States. Speaking of humiliation, America also dictated a new constitution with 2 very important conditions. First, the Japanese emperor was no longer a Shinto god, but a human being. Second, Japan could not have an army, which to this day Japan's military is called self-defense force. Mishima disliked both conditions. As a young boy, he lived with his grandparents who didn't allow him to play outside with other boys, which made him soft, scrawny, and weak. Returning to his parents' house, his father, a military man, was appalled by his feminine tendencies, so he banned him from reading literature and writing. In his essay, Sun and Steel, Mishima agrees with his father that writing made him like a woman. Hence, he took up bodybuilding later in life. Age 12, he started writing, and his talent was discovered when he was 16 with a short story titled Forest in Full Bloom, depicting the spirit of his ancestors still alive within him, which came at the height of Japanese nationalism in 1940s. During his high school graduation in 1944, the Japanese Emperor Hirohito was present, which must have had a massive impact on the young boy. That same year, he was drafted for the military, but he failed due to medical checkup because he had tuberculosis. Mishima hated himself for being weak. In 1945, Mishima's mood took a darker turn when the Emperor Hirohito announced the Japanese surrender. Even worse still, his 17-year-old sister died of typhoid that same year. Then adding to his miseries, his high school sweetheart, whom he was supposed to marry, ended up marrying another man. A year later, he met Yasunari Kawabata, who was so impressed with Mishima's writing, and this lifted his mood slightly. In 1947, after getting a degree from Tokyo University, he started work at the Ministry of Finance, but resigned 9 months later to write full-time. In 1948, he published his first novel, Thieves, about 2 men who are drawn to ending their lives. A year later, he published Confessions of a Mask about his teenage crush on another boy. Now, a published author, he started traveling to Brazil, the United States, England, Italy, and Greece. While in Greece, the beautiful statues of strong men inspired him to start weightlifting in 1955, training almost daily. He also became a kendo master, a karate fighter. In his famous 1968 essay Sun and Steel, he explains that modernity is obsessed with the mind, ideas, and words, while neglecting a strong body. In the 1960s, he also acted in several movies, modeled for fitness magazines, got married, and had children. There are also rumors about his homosexuality because he wrote about it in his stories, and also he was seen visiting gay bars in Tokyo. His wife rejected this idea and even sued a man who claimed Mishima wrote him love letters. In 1985, George Lucas, the American director, directed a movie titled Mishima Alive in 4 chapters, but it was never shown in Japan, perhaps because the movie alleged homosexuality, something his wife denied. While his novels are generally apolitical, the left despised them. He saw communism, the Soviet Union, and China as the real enemy of Japan and considered the US as a lesser of the two evils. He also went deeper into Shintoism, which was instrumental in Japanese economic and military expansion since the 19th century. In the 1960s, during mass protests against the Americanization of Japan on university campuses led by the left, Mishima was so alarmed that he started his own right-wing army in case of the left-wing revolution. While the government noticed this, the right-wing elements within the government ignored Mishima's private army. And some even supported him by allowing him to train with the Japanese Self-Defense Force. This all culminated in the tragic event in 1970 when he exhibited his own death in public. Mishima despised how materialism and consumerism were the new ideologies taking over Japan. Quote, "I cannot have much hope for the future of Japan. As days pass, I feel more and more deeply that if things should proceed this way, Japan, quotation marks, might end up disappearing. Japan might disappear, in its place a large economic country which is inorganic, vacant, neutral, medium-colored, wealthy, and shrewd would remain at one corner of the Far East. I don't feel like conversing with those people who think that that is all right." Now I'll discuss some of his books. Published in 1963, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea is one of Mishima's most popular novels. It tells the story of a teenage boy and his mother who has fallen in love with a sailor. Noboru, a fatherless 13-year-old boy, spies on his mother, Fusako, having sex with a sailor named Ryuji. The boy is so mesmerized by the allure of the sea that he feels his connection with the seas is established through the sexual encounter between his mother and the sailor. Noboru considers the seas as the only true meaningful entity in this world. Therefore, he has immense respect for Ryuji the sailor. He tells his friends about Ryuji, describing him almost like a mythical hero. But it's all about to change. One day, the teenager Noboru sees Ryuji the sailor drenched in fountain water inside a park. He realizes his hero is nothing but an undignified loser. Later, when his mother announces that she is engaged to the sailor, Noboru loses all respect for the man. A heroic sailor taming the wild seas has now become like a domestic animal, a husband. When Fusako discovers that Noboru spied on them having sex, she asks Ryuji to punish the boy, but the sailor acts like a soft father. This further damages his reputation as a hard, masculine man. Noboru calls an emergency meeting with his gang of teenagers. They lure Ryuji the sailor to a dry dock to execute him so he dies a hero. The teenagers plan it meticulously, with tea, pills, rope, a blindfold, etc. Ryuji is very tame and clueless. I don't want to spoil the ending. Some suggest the novel shows the teenage psychopathy similar to The Lord of Flies by William Golding, published 9 years earlier, and some even label it fascistic due to a few disturbing scenes. Perhaps Mishima pushed it to the extreme, but he wanted to contrast a hero who was taming the wild seas to a man being domesticated at home. For Noboru, Ryuji and the sea were one and the same thing. Once that mask fell off, the teenager felt betrayed. The fatherless Noboru looked up to the sailor as a male role model and hero. But when the sailor gets tamed by the teenager's mother, he loses all respect for him. During wars, coward soldiers were shot by their own army for not fulfilling their roles. It's the same here. Mishima depicts the sea as a character in the novel, so while Ryuji is at sea, there's calm on land. And when he is ashore, there is cruelty on land. Ryuji, despite being a simple sailor, is deeply complex with deep unfulfilled dreams. While the teenagers are cruel, Mishima has sympathy for the sailor. Quote, sometimes as he listened to the song or hummed it, tears brimmed in his eyes, just as in the lyrics. Strange that a man with no ties should become sentimental about a harbor town. But the tears welled directly from a dark, distant, enervated part of himself he had neglected all his life and couldn't command. Published in 1949, Confessions of a Mask is a coming-of-age story about a physically weak, frail teenage boy called Ko-chan who is obsessed with the robust, masculine body of another boy called Umi. He is so obsessed with the manly, masculine body that when he learns a picture of a knight he adores is not of a man but of a woman, he is so devastated and immediately starts to hate Joan of Arc for putting on a man's clothes and pretending to be a man. People consider this novel to be a confession of Mishima's own homosexuality. In his early life, Mishima was so cushioned that he grew up hating his frail feminine body, which in his novel manifests itself in a homosexual love for another boy. It might have damaged Mishima's own image among the Japanese right, but he couldn't care and wrote despite how others might have judged him. His honesty is clear in this novel. Published in 1956, The Temple of the Golden Pavilion fictionalizes a real event in 1950 when an insane monk burned down one of the most iconic Buddhist temples in Kyoto. Before writing the novel, Mishima met the arsonist monk who was released from prison due to his mental health. Mizoguchi, growing up, his father told him about the Golden Temple's incredible beauty. After his father's death, Mizoguchi becomes a priest of the temple. He imagined the temple to be absolutely perfect, but now that he lives there during the war, he wishes the Americans bomb it. Why? Perhaps there's a discrepancy between what he imagined and what he sees in reality. Today, some Japanese tourists visiting Paris is so traumatized that they seek medical treatment. Paris syndrome, as it is called, is caused by the fact that the Japanese tourists imagine Paris to be absolutely beautiful and every way perfect. But when they visit, they notice how rude the Parisians are and how unsafe it can be. They are traumatized. It is expectation versus reality. The Golden Temple itself is a paradox. Zen Buddhism promotes simplicity, austerity, and detachment from worldly possessions, while the temple is flashy, ostentatious, and gold. It was originally built as a shogun's palace, but later donated to a temple. But for Mizoguchi, the paradox of imagined beauty and the physical reality leads him to destroy the actual thing in order to preserve the beauty that existed in his imagination. As Proust said, you cannot imagine something that is real. As soon as you see the actual thing, that image is destroyed in your head forever. To preserve the beautiful temple in his imagination, the monk wanted to destroy the actual thing. Published in 1968, 2 years before his own death, Sun and Steel is partly a philosophical essay and partly an autobiography. Mishima uses the sun and steel as metaphors to explain his philosophy and his life. The sun symbolizes the outside reality. Its blinding light, its terrible heat during Japanese summers can be unbearable, but every living being needs the sun. The sun is also a metaphor for men, the masculine, the person outside the house who toils in the field, carrying portable shrines during the summer festivals in Japan. In other words, the sun is all about action. Mishima says as a writer he was a man of words, not action, because he was sitting indoor away from the sun. As a physically frail man, he says he developed and relied on his ability to use words, not muscles. How about steel? Mishima uses steel to symbolize the human muscles. Quote, Little by little, moreover, the properties of my muscles came increasingly to resemble those of steel. This slow development, I found, was remarkably similar to the process of education, which remodels the brain intellectually by feeding it with progressively more difficult matter. So, as a writer, Mishima relied on words, therefore denying himself both the sun and steel. His writing room was like a pit, a dungeon, slowly rotting his body, sagging his stomach, weakening his physique, and making his skin sickly and translucent. Quote, "The steel faithfully taught me the correspondence between the spirit and the body. Thus, feeble emotions, it seemed to me, corresponded to flaccid muscles, sentimentality to a sagging stomach, and over-impressionability to an oversensitive white skin. Bulging muscles, a taut stomach, and a tough skin, I reason, would correspond respectively to an intrepid fighting spirit, the power of dispassionate intellectual judgment, and a robust disposition." The following 9 lessons are based on this essay. Take them with a big pinch of salt. These are nuanced and deeply philosophical ideas, so do not take everything literally. They are meant to provoke you to think, not copy blindly. Lesson 1. Your body connects you to reality. Sometimes we are lost in our dreams, thoughts, and ideas when you lose sense of reality, but the closest reality we face is our own body. Quote, "As I pondered the nature of that I, quotation marks, I was driven to the conclusion that the I in question corresponded precisely with the physical space that I occupied. What I was seeking, in short, was a language of the body. If myself was my dwelling, then my body resembled an orchard that surrounded it." Sometimes our mind is floating in the stratosphere, our body grounds us to reality. Quote, "When I examined closely my early childhood, I realized that my memory of the words reaches back far farther than my memory of the flesh. In the average person, I imagine, the body precedes language. In my case, words came first of all. Then belatedly, with every appearance of extreme reluctance and already clothed in concepts, came the flesh. It was already, as goes without saying, sadly wasted by words." Mishima goes on to say, "It was thus that I started writing novels, and this increased my thirst for reality and the flesh." So when we disengage from reality, your body over time reminds you of that reality. You need to move, go outside, run and stretch. This is why Murakami runs every day. This is why after small or big physical illness, we shift our mind, habit, behavior drastically. So your body is your reality. Lesson 2. Modernity has killed muscles. Evolutionary biology created 2 pinnacles of beauty, one for males and one for females. But modernity invented tools and technology that made a man's ideal, from depicted in Greek and Roman statues, unnecessary, superfluous, and even toxic. Mishima says, "The groups of muscle that have become virtually unnecessary in modern life, though still a vital element of a man's body, are obviously pointless from a practical point of view, and bulging muscles are as unnecessary as a classical education is to the majority of practical men. Muscles have gradually become something akin to classical Greek. To revive the dead language, the disciplines of the steel was required. To change the silence of death into the eloquence of life, the aid of steel was essential." The human body was cherished as a work of art in ancient Greece and Rome, but today most men are out of shape, fat, and lazy. For Mishima, each fiber of muscle is as powerful as words. In fact, words cannot describe when you become one with your body. Quote, "Even the muscles themselves no longer existed. I was enveloped in a sense of power as transparent as light." So modernity invented weapons and technology that made strong muscles almost obsolete. Hand-to-hand combat is only practiced in entertainment, not in the real world. This is why when Japan started to modernize in late 19th century, the first thing they did was to eliminate the samurai class, because for modernity, productivity is far more precious, so having a samurai class would be a danger to a centralized government. Lesson 3. Pain is the best expression of life. Evolution has given us many things that are also good and terrible. For example, without the sensation of pain, we would burn ourselves without realizing that we are getting cooked, just like a dead body feels no pain. Feeling pain is synonymous with life, so pain during workout can be a healing force for many mental illnesses. Quote, "Pain I came to feel might well prove to be the sole proof of the persistence of consciousness within the flesh. The sole physical expression of consciousness. As my body acquired muscle and in turn strength, there was gradually born within me a tendency towards a positive acceptance of pain, and my interest in physical suffering deepened. Even so, I would not have it believed that this development was a result of the workings of my imagination. My discovery was made directly with my body, thanks to the sun and the steel." For Mishima, heroes absorb physical pain by putting their own bodies on the line, and the real anti-hero is a weak man. Quote, "The cynicism that regards all hero worship as comical is always shadowed by a sense of physical inferiority. Invariably, it is the man who believes himself to be physically lacking in heroic attributes who speaks mockingly of the heroes." So pain is intimately connected to being alive, but also being heroic. Of course, Mishima is talking about self-inflicted pain during workout when you push your body to the limits, which can be perfect cure for anxiety and depression, adding to the old adage of a sound mind and a sound body. Lesson 4. Death is beautiful. In the samurai philosophy of Bushido, it is the masculine duty to die for the honor of your family, clan, community, and country. Mishima says that when you cannot see the seed of an apple until you cut through it, the same goes for heroes. Mishima's obsession with death led to his obsession with weightlifting in order to prepare his saggy, ugly body for a beautiful death. Quote, "For me, the beautiful death that had earlier eluded me had also become possible. What was more, during the past 10 years, I had learned strength. I had learned suffering, battle, and self-conquest. I had learned the courage to accept them all with joy." For Mishima, the body is like a vehicle of life as well as death, so it must be beautiful like a piece of art. While he had the same muscles as those of the beautiful and majestic Greek statues or heroic warriors, but in his body, these muscles look ugly and small. By building his body, he was showcasing it as a beautiful piece of art. His final act in 1970 was to destroy the body he had spent years building. It's like an artist who spends years building a monument and then destroy it at the end. A workout is nothing but destroying muscle cells. Lesson 5. Happiness is when you face danger. Quote, "Quite possibly what I call happiness may coincide with others call the moment of imminent danger. Adrenaline rush in extreme sports or being chased by a wild animal or a bull in Spain is nothing but experiencing danger." Quote, "The thing that lay at the far end of my dreams was extreme danger and destruction. Never once had I envisaged happiness." Mishima says throughout his writing career, he avoided danger by sitting at home weaving words, which added to his misery and which in turn made his writing better. However, he felt more intense happiness when he trained his muscles. Quote, "The sense of existence that produced such an intense happiness disintegrated, of course, a moment later, but the muscles miraculously survived the disintegration." In other words, while intellectual muscles are like a house of cards easily destroyed by wind, while building a strong body is like a house of steel that stands firm in the face of dangers. Lesson 6. Discipline brings joy. Between 1945 and 1970, in the span of 25 years, Mishima wrote 34 novels, 50 plays, 25 books of short story collections, and at least 35 books of essays. He spent hours in the gym weightlifting, practicing karate, kendo, and acting and modeling. For Mishima, his exercise routine was much like sleep, a necessity of life. With each session, he felt reborn. While inactive, our body goes to sleep. With each exercise session, it's rejuvenated. All the cells and fibers in your muscles break down and regenerate themselves to vitalize you. Could. This does not imply, of course, that after my small rebirths of the soul and the flesh, I went back reluctantly with a sense of duty to the world of words. On the contrary, this was the one procedure that ensured that I should return to them joyfully and with a glad heart. It's true that if you have discipline with your body, you can apply it to your intellectual endeavors. Lesson 7. Words also distort reality. For Mishima, the deeper you go with writing, the more unique you become. But the deeper you go with the human body, the less unique you become. We all have the same muscle structure, while our imagination is limitless. There lies the problem. You cannot fake your body, but you can certainly fake your words to mask reality. Dinosaur bones do not lie, but human writing can and does. Could. Words are a medium that reduces reality to abstraction for transmission to our reason, and in their power to corrode reality inevitably lurks the danger that the words themselves will be corroded too. Words are like masks. If you have nothing to hide, you need not to say a thing. It might sound counterintuitive. The more one says, the more they tend to hide. Words are justification, explanations, and manipulation. For Mishima, true heroes needed not say a word. Quote, when someone seeks to tell the truth, words always falter in this way. I can almost see him now, fumbling for words, not from shyness, nor from fear, for the naked truth inevitably produces this verbal stumbling, but rather as a sign of certain rough quality about truth itself. Dostoevsky came to a similar conclusion during his Siberian labor camp, and as a result, he despised intellectuals who used fancy words and long speeches. He found immense honesty among men who talked very little because action speaks louder. It is rare to have someone like Mishima who pushed his body and mind to extreme levels. For Mishima, the better you become with words, the more deceiving you can become. But the more you train your body, the more honest you can become. Lesson 8. We crave belonging. Writing makes you isolated and solitary, but at our core we are social animals. Mishima wanted to belong to a group and a tribe. Quote, the group is a concept of uncommunicable shared suffering, a concept that ultimately rejects the agency of words. As a young man, he was rejected by others, so he took refuge in writing. When he looked at himself, a pathetic loser, he realized he should not blame others, but instead build his own body. For Mishima, group represents the body, the physical reality, while words represent imagination, which is freedom from the group. A group is real, while words are imagined. Being part of a group means you have to be fully in. Quote, in this way, the group for me had come to represent a bridge that once crossed left no means of return. While Mishima was a right-wing nationalist, he never inflicted violence on others but himself. But we'll never know whether he would have done more extreme acts had he had more power. But his message is clear that you cannot do without belonging to a group that is bigger than yourself. This is especially true for writers who spend hours alone. Lesson 9. Courage is the true purpose. In the old epics and religious myths, heroes showed courage by sacrificing themselves for others. Jesus is a good example. Mishima wanted to tell the world about the importance of courage, the importance of discipline, the importance of fit body, and the importance of thinking outside the material and consumer world. And most importantly, embracing life and death with courage. Quote, to embrace suffering is the constant role of physical courage, and physical courage is, as it were, the source of that taste for understanding and appreciating death that more than anything else is a prime condition of making true awareness of death possible. However, much the closeted philosopher mulls over the idea of death, so long as he remains divorced from the physical courage that is a prerequisite for an awareness of it, he will remain unable even to begin to grasp it. I must make it clear that I am talking of physical courage. The conscience of the intellectual and the intellectual courage are no concerns of mine. Yukio Mishima was a brilliant writer, controversial figure, and no doubt he pushed himself to the extremes of mental capacity as a writer and to the extremes of physical capacity as a bodybuilder. While some might consider his ideas dangerous for the average man, he certainly showed that one can train both the mind and the body. As a feeble young man, he sat down to become a writer, a great one, but then he realized his body is sagging. He started training his muscles. Both his intellectual and physical journeys taught him different things. Through reading and writing, he connected with the community of writers from centuries ago. This intellectual bond made him understand the power of human imagination, something we all share. But through bodybuilding, he connected not only with millions of years of evolution, but also with the warriors and heroes of centuries past. He could understand the heroes and villains to a deeper level, not only through written words, but through his muscle fibers. Perhaps his ultimate aim was to have a heroic death like a samurai. It is no exaggeration to say that he was the last true samurai Japan ever produced. His public death was a defiance against materialism and consumerism, which can fill your house with lots of stuff, but it will leave you empty on the inside. The more you consume, the less you build your character. Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。